welcome to our show, It's About Money. I'm Nanette Nokan, and thank you for joining us. As you know, we cover a different financial topic for every show, and our purpose is to educate and motivate our viewers to looking at their financial picture and hopefully taking some action to achieving them. However, there's no substitute to comprehensive financial planning, so I want to remind you that it's always best to work with a team of professionals, which includes a financial advisor, an accountant, and an attorney. I'm very excited about our topic today. It's on making a millionaire. And we have a wonderful guest. His name is Thomas F. Ward, and he's a senior platinum financial advisor from American Express Financial Advisors, and he will share with us some ideas on how we can achieve that status. There are 3.5 households for every 100 households who have achieved millionaire status. And last year alone, there were 800,000 people who became millionaires. Now, most of the time when we think of millionaires, we think of those superstars who make millions of dollars, like the Michael Jordans and Tiger Woods and so on. What I'm talking about is the millionaire next door, as the authors Stanley and Danka refer to. These are your average people like you and I that just work, earn a living, and save and invest our money. So let me not defer any longer and introduce our guest, Thomas F. Ward, who has been a financial advisor for over 18 years, and
That's
I know
correct.
that you've helped a lot of people become financially independent and achieve millionaire status. So I am so pleased that you're here with us today.
It's very nice to be here, Nanette. Thanks for having me.
Great. Now let's start and talk about the profile, typical profile of your millionaire client. You know, I'm sure they're not the Michael Jordans and Tiger Woods, but tell us about them.
Not a lot of those two around, are
Yeah,
there?
right.
My typical millionaire client, who is someone who has done it the old-fashioned way, in that he has worked or she has worked and saved on a regular basis. Some of them have done it in the context of being business owners, but most of them, about 75% of my millionaires, are people who are now typically in their early to mid-50s or beyond, and who have had the sense to save money on a regular basis. The 25% that are business owners are really very similar still in the 75% who are in a typical employer-employee relationship. They're both similar in that they both surround themselves with very successful people. So the business owner, she has a good staff of people working with her to make sure they have a business plan, and they follow that plan on a regular basis. And they modify the plan when there's changes in the business environment as it impacts on them. The person who is an employee of a corporation also has surrounded himself or herself with capable people. And that being, to what you alluded to before, the accountant, the financial advisor, the attorney. So you really need a team approach. So they're very similar in that respect, although how they generate their revenue is different because of the challenges of the business environment versus the employer-employee relationship. They're also very similar in that both take risks. The business owner probably has collateral pledged against their house, probably had 2 or 3 mortgages on their house at one point. But they took a risk because they felt that ownership was the way to financial independence. The person who works for someone else and has attained millionaire status has also done it by taking risks, but in a different format. And by that I mean the people who have attained millionaire status are those that typically believe in ownership versus loaning money to people. And ownership for the typical person means investing in American industry and now industry outside of our borders, the global marketplace. So investing in stocks, not having too many of their dollars in things where you loan money to people, such as in bonds.
Sure, or
So that's
CDs.
Exactly.
Oh, great. That sounds good. So it sounds like the average, everyday people. I shouldn't say average, but they're like normal people, like you and I and our viewers as well.
That's correct.
So,
Yep.
okay.
There's a lot of you out there.
Yep. That's right. Now, what is the mindset of these people? I mean, you've mentioned that they take risks, but there's the income side, and then there's also the outflow side. Many people think, well, you know, my income's not high enough, therefore I cannot save and invest to even begin to think about becoming a millionaire. But there's the side where what you do with the money that you earn for a living. Now, what's the mentality of these people?
The people that get to this level, if that's what someone aspires to get to, I find started at a young age and designed a program of systematic savings. And there's almost everyone in our audience today has that opportunity because of the proliferation of retirement plans in the workforce, where you can shelter money through a tax-sheltered annuity if you work for a not-for-profit, or through a 401k, or a simple IRA, or a SEP IRA. The people who have saved on a regular basis, to coin that old expression, pay yourself first, a large number of those people have truly gotten to that, what they once probably thought, unattainable status.
Sure. So just creating a strategy to save
That's right.
and invest
Have
and
a plan.
sticking with it.
Work the plan.
Right.
Yep.
And think twice about taking the money out for loans and things like that, right? Stick with it.
Yes. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen is people get very short-sighted about their financial concern, and don't track where the money's going on a paycheck-to-paycheck basis, find themselves in debt, want to borrow against the retirement plan. They may never get to that promised land, if that's what they perceive to be the promised land.
Sure. So creative financing of today is not necessarily the path to reaching that
That's
goal
correct.
of having financial independence. Yeah.
In one word, probably discipline would be the word that would get you there.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, we talked about the saving. There's also the piece of the power of compounding. Can you say something about what that means to people with the power of compounding, starting earlier versus later and that kind of thing?
Really, compounding is a mathematical approach to financial independence, and it simply says $1 invested today, earning interest 5% a year. Next year, you're compounding the 5% on top of the $1.05 you have at the end of year one. And you would be surprised over the financial lifetime of an individual how much that compounding effect has on people. A good financial advisor can show a client the power of that simply, for example, starting saving a little bit, 5% per year in your 401k plan at age 22 versus waiting till you're age 40 and saving 15%. The person who starts out with a little bit earlier ends up with a lot more than the person who does a lot later.
Yes, that's absolutely
Yes.
true. And sometimes it's hard for people to believe until they see the numbers. And how could that be? Save twice as much.
You pull it up on your computer screen, the net, and they say, "Oh, there's something wrong with it. That can't be right." But it's not smoke and mirrors. It's just simple mathematics, the power of compounding, as you alluded to.
Yep, that's for sure. Now, what about the right investment strategy? People talk about, oh, I bought this and I sold this, I made money on this. What is the right approach to investing? Is it market timing? Is it what approach do you use when talking to clients?
Some would argue in today's environment that the right approach may be the Wall Street Journal test of a few years ago, where people threw darts on the wall and selected a stock. But quite honestly, the right approach is buy low and sell high.
Words of wisdom.
Yes. You need to define a strategy. You need to talk with an advisor and look at how comfortable you are with different kinds of investments. Nowadays, there are so many people who are fairly new to the investment arena who haven't really seen a down market yet. And it will happen. No one knows when. And that's why if you have someone who talks to you about being a market timer, personally I would be very skeptical about the person who says they can help you by being a market timer. History would show that timing the market does not win. It's participating in the market that's important. It's the time in the market, not the timing of the market, that's important. Okay. If I could elaborate a little more on that. Some of the electronic and print media nowadays talk about your age, and they say, gee, if you're 60, you should have 60% in this investment and 40% in that investment. The approach that our company takes is really not so much how old you are, but what is the time frame of those goals? When are you going to need to access those funds? That's really what should drive the portfolio. Design a good asset allocation strategy, modify it from time to time, rebalance the portfolio, and keep your advisor appraised of how your goals and objectives may change.
Sure, that's right. And actually, when we talk about allocating dollars, we really mean like investing in different types of investments, right? Like
Yes.
small companies, large companies, and so on and so
Yes,
forth.
that's key.
Right.
You could pick up any financial publication and you might see a pie graph. You may get it in your newsletter from your 401k provider that says X% stocks, X% bonds, X% cash or real estate. In reality, that's a good guideline, but it doesn't go far enough. Asset allocation is a real science.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, if you read a magazine and said you should have 35% in bonds, well, that doesn't go as far as it should, in my opinion, because bonds can be broken down into short-term, intermediate-term, long-term,
Mm-hmm.
taxable, high-grade, low-grade, governmental bonds.
Right.
So as you can see, the broad brush that says X% in bonds needs to really be broken down even further.
Yeah, a little bit more specific.
Yes.
The other piece I think to that is sometimes people forget that when they think about investing, that when they retire, you know, they say, oh, what recommendations is that I go 75% fixed, 25% equities. But then they have another 30 years to live. So if they start becoming more, you know, more conservative, they're losing out on the opportunity to have their assets grow over
Yes,
time.
that's an excellent point, Nanette. When you look at the workforce in Monroe County, for example, today, there are many people who have left what they thought was going to be their career till age 60 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
They've left because of great opportunities presented by their employer, or they've left because there weren't opportunities that their employer could offer anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so even 30 years may not be the right time frame for, you know, there's people leaving work at 49, 50,
Sure.
52,
That's true.
and
That's true.
we're all going to live longer, I hope, so you really need a good plan to work that.
Sure.
If I look back, when I started in this career, I'm in my 19th year now, one of the biggest mistakes early on was to think, boy, you're 60, you're right, you should be conservative. But just the opposite, because you do have, as you said, a long lifetime financially.
Sure. Yeah. And perhaps a lot of unexpected expenses
Sure.
with medical and so on. Okay, we know that in the coming decades there's going to be trillions of dollars that will be passed from the older generation to the new generation. And I think some people are not prepared to handle those funds. In fact, I have met people who inherit 100,000 and have the best intentions to use it for long-term planning, but then in 12 to 24 months, they've pretty much depleted it to support their lifestyle. How should people be preparing for this transfer of wealth, if you will?
Yes. You talked about millionaires at the onset.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have one lottery winner who's a millionaire.
Oh,
But even before that client became a millionaire via the lottery, they had done a financial plan. And all we did after the fortune of the lottery was update that financial plan.
mm-hmm.
And that's really very key, especially for people who may not be used to handling larger sums of money in the past. They haven't probably stopped to think about how they really feel about different things in life, about whether they should pay all of their child's education or part of it, should loans be involved. And the financial planning process helps one get to those core feelings and beliefs that they have, and ties that in with a quantitative approach to all of these things, taking into account what different model portfolios might yield,
Mm-hmm.
what inflation's going to do to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so key, is to, again, do a plan so that you can have some assistance and a second opinion about, you know, what's really going to happen if I retire at 60, or if I retire at 55,
Mm-hmm.
or if I retire at 65. You need all of those answers.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I talk about being a millionaire, but really to achieve financial independence, it may be that people don't need to become millionaires.
That's
If
correct.
they've done the right planning and look at their income and expense and see, you know, how much is needed to support their lifetime needs and through their life expectancy. So being a millionaire is really a nice thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people must achieve that status to become financially independent.
That's a very good point. Some of my most rewarding experiences as a financial advisor are helping people decide that yes, they can afford to retire early.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if someone truly dislikes their job, or if all of a sudden they're furloughed unexpectedly, if they've saved money on a regular basis, it's very nice for them to look at the numbers and realize that, I don't have to worry about starting a new career, that I can do what I want when I want. And that's why planning's been very helpful. I've had people, and I'm sure you have too, Nanette, with all your years in the industry, people have come and said, well, I think I'm going to work till I'm 65. And as you probe and ask why, it's because they just have never done a plan and they just think that they'll have to work forever. And when the process is done, they realize that they don't have to do that if they choose not to.
Sure, that's right. One of the best things about planning is just having options. Just looking at your options, what are your alternatives, and if you choose to go a different path, what do you need to do in order to achieve that, and so on. So I think planning has that ability to help people examine what their options are and give them peace of mind and so on. And I agree with you. And it's just that is very satisfying to help clients achieve their goals and say, yeah, you can retire at 50 because you've done this planning all along. So
Nanette, let me switch roles for a moment.
Sure.
Have you ever had anyone who came in and was able to retire at age 50 because they just started saving when they were 45?
Oh, absolutely not. Oh, yeah, I think that's the biggest joke. And people come in like, well, I'm retiring in 5 years. Okay, well, what are you willing to do to achieve that? Well, they don't have the answers. They think that it could just magically happen and Social Security will be there when they're 62 and so on. But it does take careful planning over time. It just doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Is financial planning, I think we've answered this, some people think that financial planning is really only for the wealthy, and that's not really correct. Can you help us answer that question? Is financial planning only for the wealthy?
Au contraire. Picture a wealthy individual. He or she can afford to make some mistakes in the market and probably not seriously impact their lifestyle. I don't want to talk of, Gates or someone of that magnitude, or Michael Jordan. Michael can lose a lot on the golf course, okay? Not going to affect his lifestyle. But someone, your more typical millionaire, has probably made some bad investments, but it hasn't affected their lifestyle. And they may have even managed their portfolio very conservatively, but there's such a mass available that inflation doesn't really eat into it. But the more typical client out there, if you're able to, for example, get 1% more per year on your portfolio through an asset allocation model, which doesn't give you any more risk than your current investments, it just gives a more efficient mix of investments, you'd be surprised how that 1% can help you for many, many years to come.
Sure.
And if you make that mistake when you're not as well off, it takes a long time to catch up. So probably, other than from an estate planning point of view, the millionaire doesn't need planning as much as our more typical clients.
Sure, because they need to build the resources
to
make it happen, to be able to become financially independent. I was just doing a calculation. I said, well, if someone spent, say, $7.50 on lunch every day for 30 years, how much, and if instead of spending it for lunch, they took that money and invested it and got 10% return, they'll end up with like $300,000. And I thought, boy, who would have ever thought that lunch money could take could bring $300,000 for later use. But then I thought, it's always nice to be able to manage your finances where you can say, okay, I'm going to make this change in my lifestyle so I can achieve this objective. Because sometimes people just say, well, I have got, $1,000 a month and I spend it all. They forget about paying themselves and looking at what it means to plan for long term. But the less people have, the more they need to save and invest.
Another example of that, and as we speak, I think Washington's finally going to come through with a tax reform package, although I don't know where they're going to get all the revenue to offset the promises they're making. But it appears that IRAs may be back for people, or at least more people will be able to take that deduction. I remember years ago when everyone could contribute $2,000 and take the deduction. We used to do calculations that just show people if they put the money in January of each year instead of waiting till the following March or April, just that extra year, putting that $2,000 in up front for 10, 20, or 30 years, the compounding effect was phenomenal.
Right.
Again, people became skeptical, but
Right.
it was factual.
Right, and actually the importance of that too is if someone had $2,000 sitting in their savings account earning interest, you know, during the year they're going to get taxed on it, and in addition to that they're not allowing their money to compound sooner. So it's
Yeah.
really better if they save it a lot
Yeah.
earlier.
Just this morning I had clients in my office who typically get a federal tax refund of $4,000 to $5,000.
It's quite
And
substantial.
I thanked them, and they looked at me quizzically. And I said, well, I thank you for letting the government hold on to this interest-free money for all year, because then they'll want, you know, less from me.
Right,
And,
that's right. So a different way to look
Yeah,
at it, yes,
yeah.
right. Because sometimes people say, well, it's the only way I save. Well, you
Yeah.
know, the government saves too. But now, walk us through the role of a financial advisor in the process. You know, we've concurred that financial planning is not just for the wealthy, it's really for, you know, everyone who has a desire to have some financial independence. What is the role of a financial planner in the process?
Nanette, I would say I perceive myself more as a facilitator.
Okay.
I'm trying to gather those emotional concerns of the client, trying to gather all the facts, all the data. Sometimes they've never even wrapped their arms around their employee benefit statements and all of those other things. But we're really kind of a counselor in some respects. I had a school administrator retire last month, and in the process of deciding that he was ready, he said, you know, you're more like a counselor than a planner for me at this point. But the counseling came as we talked about the things that were important to him.
Sure.
And we then coordinated with his tax preparer, and we got his attorney involved. And we looked at all the numbers, and I sat down with the attorney and said, here's my observation. She lent her expertise to the relationship. So we kind of design the game plan, develop the team, and then go from there.
Okay. And then it's very important to monitor the plan and make sure that people are implementing over
extremely
time.
important.
Right.
A good point again with recent tax reform. Soon it will come out in its final stages, and part of that is a state tax planning, long overdue, I might add.
Right.
And you'll be able to pass on more money to your favorite charity, be it your kids or your former college or church, without as big a bite of estate taxes coming into play. And that means you should sit down again and review forms of ownership, who owns it, you know, is that the most prudent way to handle it, the most efficient way to handle it?
And just to say that it's not a one-time event, really, because events change in the client's life, the tax laws changes, the economic environment changes, so it's very important to review the plan and make sure it's good working order.
Economics are changing? You mean the market isn't going to go 40%
Yeah, really,
every
what's
year?
wrong? I should be guaranteeing that, right?
Yeah, right. There goes your license.
Yeah, right. Oh, goodness. Just a joke. Let's see. Now, any other words of wisdom that you can share to our viewers today as far as how to manage their money and become financially independent?
Don't be afraid to own. And again, when I say own, I mean buying shares of companies, stocks. Whether you're more comfortable with the mutual fund approach or the individual securities approach, or a combination of both. If you don't feel you have the time, tools, and temperament to do it yourself, align yourself with somebody through referrals, through interviews that you feel can get you to where you want to go. Don't worry about what the neighbor says and how the neighbor only tells you about his or her successes. You never hear about anyone's financial failures, but they occur without prudent planning. As we've said many times, design a plan and work the plan. Start young, save regularly, even if it's only 1% in your employer-provided plan. And don't be afraid when the market corrects itself. There are numerous volumes of information about corrections in the market and everything else. Just remember that it's a roller coaster ride. You're only going to get hurt if you jump out of the roller coaster. And as the finish line gets nearer, that roller coaster shouldn't be going as high and low on the curves. It should be flattening out for that money that you're going to need for that finish line.
Excellent. Those are great words, right?
Okay.
The only thing I would want to add to that is that make sure that people keep perspective of where they want to go.
That's correct.
Because if they say, well, I want to retire, these are my goals, and things come up and say, oh, I want that brand new car, I really can't afford it, but I want it, and they take the funds, of course it negates the planning for the future. So very important to look long term and make sure that you're working towards meeting those goals and objectives.
And take the dreams and quantify them and make them goals too.
Yes,
Yeah.
very, very important.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, and I just want to say that in closing, that it's not just the money that you make or the assets that you have that makes a difference, it's how you spend your money and how you invest for the long term. So again, thank you so much, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please write to us at It's About Money, P.O. Box 301, Penfield, New York, 14526-0301. And again, thank you very much, Tom, for joining us today.
Nanette, thank you.
Appreciate it.